Booyah!
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to The Fringe. Interesting developments going on with Team Canada, or at least Justin Trudeau's Team Canada, which we all know on this channel is Team WEF. I want to touch base on what's happening because right now Team Canada is falling apart and it's crumbling. And this is what I was pointing to yesterday on yesterday's video, talking about how I don't believe anything good is going to come from this 30-day delay of Donald Trump tariffs. The reason being is because of our leaders. It's not our people. It's not the fact that we want to make things better. It's that those who are in charge of our country are showing full force that all of this has to do with them, what they're trying to push for their gains, their benefits. And it's going to get very interesting to see what continues to happen. I want to touch base on why this tariff deal is a bad deal for both Canada and the US. You'll have to excuse me as I'm reading straight from a source as talking about this. But when it looks like if Canada cut its energy supply to the US, the trade that goes on right now, that if Trump slaps his 25% tariff on Canadian goods and services in retaliation, Canada could essentially, holding significant leverage, threaten to cut off its energy outputs to Canada supplies to the U.S., and that's about 60% of the crude oil to the U.S. that we give, crucially for the United States like Michigan and Wisconsin. Ontario alone, in terms of electricity, powers 1.5 million homes, particularly in Michigan, New York, and Minnesota. So if Canada were to pull the plug, gas prices could soar by an extra 70 cents per gallon in the United States. Canada is also the leading source in imported electricity into the U.S. with 33 million megawatt hours. And that's crossing the border annually, by the way. Cutting its supply could plunge parts of the United States essentially into darkness, disrupting everyday life from New York all the way to the Midwest. It could lead to economic chaos, with the US GOP potentially shrinking by 467 billion, while Canada's only goes down by 78. That is the reality of why we're facing such an issue when it comes to these tariffs. So people are saying, well, if Donald Trump is essentially putting $470 billion of the United States' potential trading economy on the table to push Canada to become the 51st state, a lot of conversations come up when it's, well, what is the reason for that? Is Donald Trump trying to annex Canada? Does he want our resources? Is this part of globalization? At this point, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to what's happening with our country, I do believe a lot of it has to do with securing borders. I believe that some of it has to do with securing illegal substances coming over the borders to make things better for Americans. It also has to do with the mass deportations that Donald Trump is trying to pull. There's a lot of things happening in the background that plague as to why Trump is doing it. Many people saying it's because he's just a bully. I've often said we shouldn't be blaming Donald Trump here. We should be blaming those that are in charge of our government. One of the people who's been championing what's happening, trying to find a resolution to keep that trade open, has been Danielle Smith. When you talk about Team Canada, when you talk about the Team Canada approach, it's not Justin Trudeau and the other premiers, it's Danielle Smith. She alone is Team Canada here. At least that's the way I feel about it. I want to highlight what she said when she sat down on the news here. Alberta had 176 billion worth of proposed pipeline projects that got canceled because of Ottawa and anti-oil and gas provinces like Quebec. In my opinion, Team Canada purposely screwed Alberta, so at this point we owe Ottawa nothing. Fine Ottawa. Fire Ottawa now. It is a bold statement, but it's vastly true. Justin Trudeau has snubbed Alberta in particular for the last 10 years. The NDP that ran Alberta back in the Rachel Notley, the sheriff of Nottingham days, completely obliterated Alberta's oil and gas sector. But Quebec, crippling Energy East, has crippled Alberta's energy sector as well. And our ability, again, if you watched our second video yesterday, talking about Pierre Poilievre wanting to open interprovincial trade and why that's beneficial, that you would think that at that point, when you look at the logistics of what Pierre's talking about, to the tune of $200 billion for national GDP, other provinces would want to step on board. That's not the case. As I said at the beginning of this video, Team Canada is crumbling and falling apart. Let's take a listen to what Danielle Smith had to say about it. And then I'm going to show you the collapse, because boy, it's glorious, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go.
You look at pipelines in particular, we had $176 billion worth of proposed projects that got canceled because of the uncertainty created by various government laws, the ban on export of bitumen from the West Coast, the No More Pipelines bill, the threats of a net zero electricity grid, of an emissions cap on oil, emissions cap on methane, net zero vehicles. The list goes on and on and on. And all of that dampens investment. And we've seen the results of it. You look at.
So we have seen the result of it when you go Canada-wide. When you look at the country and inflation, when you look at the caps and what they've done. Again, this whole trade war became an incident because our government has failed to utilize our resources properly. We could be a bigger powerhouse than America when it comes to GDP if we were to just do what Pierre is suggesting and cut down on interprovincial trade by opening our borders. Here's the problem. When you look at the Team Canada approach, Doug Ford, with his Canada is not for sale hat that was made in China. I love that everybody points that out. It's the ultimate insult to injury here. But Doug Ford, it says here, 100% wanted Donald Trump to win the election. There's many reasons for this. Now, he does try to push back on the people here saying that he's put a knife in our back. But there's a reason that Doug wanted Donald Trump to win, and that's because it's pushing his new election. It's pushing his ability to ask for another 4 years as a closet liberal to run the province of Ontario into the ground, or at least continue running it into the ground. If you look at Doug Ford's campaign, it's all Trump, 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 bad, orange man, bad. Let's pull liquor off the shelves. Let's fight back. Let's buy Canadian. We're not for sale. You're going to see him touting that Canada is not for sale hat throughout his entire election. In fact, I'm willing to bet he was pissed when he found out that there was going to be a 30-day pause because they want this trade war. This is one of the many who want this trade war. Listen to how he says here, again, Mark Slapinski, very, it's not an account worth following. This dude flip-flops more than jagmeet, saying, Doug Ford was caught on a hot mic saying something many Canadians agreed with. Donald Trump stabbed us in the back. Listen to the rhetoric. It's not very loud on this video, so you might have to turn it up a little bit. But take a listen to how Dougie puts it.
The election day, was I happy this guy won? 100% I was. Then the guy pulled out the knife and fucking used it.
He pulled out the knife and effing used it on me. He's going to campaign on Trump. His whole re-election, if he gets one, is going to be on Trump. It raises the question, when we again talk about Pierre Poilievre and his idea of opening up interprovincial trade, you would think that Quebec, who, by the way, gets almost $17 billion a year from Alberta in transfer payments, well, they don't want to pursue any other kind of oil development because, well, why would they when they just continue to be pigs at a trough, dump raw sewage into the St. Lawrence River while talking to us and educating us on environmental causes by shutting down oil and gas projects? I mean, it's completely hypocritical. When you look at the powerhouse that Quebec could be as well, by rather stating they'd rather be a have-not province and take the welfare of other provinces, I think, again, it was discussed on live stream. Do we think that those transfer payments should stop if they refuse to get involved and get their own products to market or join the energy race? Absolutely, I do. If they're not going to get on board, then the payments should be cut off. And that's, as somebody who pays their taxes and somebody who's always said, as an Albertan, we're happy to share prosperity with Canada, but you got to let us do our job. You got to let us get our products to market. As soon as you stop that, yeah, you shouldn't be getting anything from us. A good friend of the channel here, Jack Dan, tweeting out, what happened to Team Canada? Again, they're crumbling. The day after these 30-day pauses were put in place, they all go back to their own personal agendas, right? Premier Legault, when questioned about pipelines following the announcement of 30-day suspension in tariffs, stated there is no intention to revive the Energy East project. This is why I don't think the 30-day pause is going to do anything, because these guys will never learn. They don't care. It's all about themselves. Take a listen to what he says.
If during your discussions today, the issues of pipelines came up, and whether Quebec would now support either an Energy East or some other kind of pipeline that would take Alberta oil out to markets other than the U.S.
Yeah. Of course, right now, there's no social acceptability for this kind of project right now in Quebec. But, of course, situation, the economy, and what Mr. Trump is doing may change the situation in the future. So if there's a social acceptability, we will be open to these kind of projects. But right now, there's no social acceptability, no.
Okay.
That is the stupidest answer you could have ever got from a representative. Social acceptability? I don't know why Quebec continues to sit on the separatist platform and vote in complete wackos to run their province. But this pig at the trough should be told to get his marching orders and leave immediately. He does not care about Canada. I question if he even cares about Quebec. The fact that he basically says in his answer, and the hypocrisy of, well, we're prepared to act with the rest of Canada if Donald Trump changes the situation. But since everything's cool now, we're in it for ourselves. We don't really care. This is why I've said a million times over, what we should do is stop the transfer payments, build a pipeline that goes east through Ontario, down into the US, around Quebec, and up into Eastern Canada. Give the US a part of the cuts. Again, we're still raising our GDP, and cut Quebec straight out. And just tell them the same thing. Look, they did it in Calgary when they were talking about the ring road, when they were arguing in Calgary with the reservations. When they wanted too much money for the land to build through the south portion of Calgary's ring road, Calgary said, fine, then we're not just going to give you whatever you demand. We're just going to cut you off. We will build around you. We'll annex neighborhoods in Calgary. We'll relocate people because it's cheaper for us to do that. But you guys get no benefits. In fact, we'll put through a toll road going to your casinos, going to everything that you own, and you're going to have to start paying us. And I'll tell you, as soon as that threat came in, boy, did they change their tune real fast. They were happy to take a deal. I think Quebec would do the same thing in this situation where they'd say, oh, you're going to cut us off? Yes, you can build your pipeline. And that's where you need not somebody who sits like Justin Trudeau in office, but somebody who's got a pair of cojones who's willing to sit down at the table and tell Quebec straight up, you're not getting another cent unless you want to play ball with the rest of us. And if you don't, we'll find other means because it's less expensive for us to give a couple $2 billion a year to the United States by building a pipeline around you than giving you $17 billion a year to criticize Alberta and the rest of Canada's oil product. What you've seen with Team Canada continuing to fold is this tweet. Now, keep in mind, you're going to see this a lot on social media. Part of the reason I want to showcase this is because this is the government machine at work. This is obviously a bot account saying, the bot account is down here on Polling Canada, but not David Parker here. Ontario's ready to forgive Trudeau. Alberta, are you ready to leave yet? You're buying into this fake poll. Keep in mind, this is Polling Canada, Ontario federal polling. And it shows down here that the Liberals are polling ahead of the Conservatives, with the NDP in third, the Green Party, followed by the PPC, and then 2% of others. Sample size is 1,200 people online, and this is from January 30th to February 2nd, 2025. This is a false poll. The Liberals are not in the lead. When you go to 338 Canada, this was conducted February 2nd. Conservatives still in a very large lead ahead of the Liberals, even with the announcement of carbon tax Carney, showing that 43%, and they're up 4% from that, by the way. The Liberals are up 4%, but they're still sitting at 24 on a vote projection, followed by the NDP bloc and then the Green Party of Canada. The only seat the Green Party's ever going to win is Elizabeth May. But you can see the NDP are down 15. The bloc is up. Again, slated to be opposition. The Liberals here, I think, depending on what they do with Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney, whether or not they come back to Parliament, whether or not an election is called. We've seen many videos. David at Moose on the Loose put out a great video yesterday showing how the Liberals are essentially saying, look, we're only going to come back to Parliament if you promise not to call an election and vote non-confidence. I mean, they're just playing partisan politics at this point. It's please keep us in power. Please. We'll come back, we'll do our jobs, but you just can't get rid of us, please. I mean, this is ridiculous. I want to share with you guys a clip as we wind up this video. Start looking at real polls like 338. Ignore bot polls like Ontario Federal Polling. Don't let it discourage you. We're winning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to show you this video clip of Ronald Reagan. He's explaining how inflation was caused by excessive government spending even in today's markets. It reigns true today. Keep in mind, this was in the 80s. Listen to what Ronald Reagan says here and why it's still so relevant today. This tells you where the real problem is. The problem isn't us. The problem isn't Danielle Smith. This is the problem.
This idea that has been spawned here in our country that inflation somehow came upon us like a plague and therefore it's uncontrollable and no one can do anything about it is entirely spurious, and it's dangerous to say this to the people. When Mr. Carter became president, inflation was 4.8%, as you said. It had been cut in two by President Gerald Ford. It is now running at 12.7%. President Carter also has spoken of the new jobs created. Well, we always, with the normal growth in our country and increase in population, increase the number of jobs. But that can't hide the fact that there are 8 million men and women out of work in America today, and 2 million of those lost their jobs in just the last few months. Mr. Carter had also promised that he would not use unemployment as a tool to fight against inflation. And yet his 1980 economic message stated that we would reduce productivity and gross national product and increase unemployment in order to get a handle on inflation, because in January, at the beginning of the year, it was more than 18%. Since then, he has blamed to the people for inflation OPEC. He's blamed the Federal Reserve System. He has blamed the lack of productivity of the American people. He has then accused the people of living too well, and that we must share in scarcity, we must sacrifice and get used to doing with less. We don't have inflation because the people are living too well. We have inflation because the government is living too well. And the last statement, just a few days ago, was a speech to the effect that we have inflation because government revenues have not kept pace with government spending. I see my time is running out here. I'll have to get this down very fast. Yes, you can lick inflation by increasing productivity and by decreasing the cost of government to the place that we have balanced budgets and are no longer grinding out printing press money, flooding the market with it because the government is spending more than it takes in. And my economic plan calls for that. The president's economic plan calls for increasing the taxes to the point that we finally take so much money away from the people that we can balance the budget in that way. But we will have a very poor nation and a very unsound economy if we follow that path.
Follow-up.
Does that sound familiar to anybody? Does that sound familiar to anybody? Blaming inflation and on the people, saying that things are out of control, printing money. I mean, the Liberals are talking about if a tariff comes through, they want to, as Doug Ford says, by the way, before he runs into election, put billions and billions, hundreds of billions into the economy like they did during the pandemic. I know I keep circling back to that, but it's so important. The people in Ontario understand that it didn't work out for as well during the pandemic. In fact, it more than doubled our national deficit. They just want to run a circus. Every circus needs a carny. And with Mark Carney on his way in to be installed as the new Liberal leader, this is the reality we could face if we don't start putting our demands on our incoming government, saying that we need change. We need to do essentially what Ronald Reagan is talking about by taxing to the point that it's very hard on the people. I'm not saying that we need to have hard lives, but what you have to do is pull back spending. You got to tighten your belts. And while things are going to get difficult, they're eventually going to get better if we start telling these Team Canada nut jobs to start pounding sand instead of buying what they're selling. The problem is that a very small area of Canada with the largest per capita are essentially the ones who decide the fate of what happens to the rest of Canada. It's going to be interesting to see where things develop in the next 30 days with these tariff threats. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, while I agree that the United States can't afford to move forward with those tariff threats, Canada can't afford to move forward without them either. Let me know what you guys think down below is going to be the final outcome. Let me know what you think is going to happen throughout those 30 days. Let me know if you're happy to see Team Canada showing its true colors as soon as those tariffs are put on hold. And let me know what you think is going to happen for Danielle Smith as she moves forward. Again, she's already stated she's making 2 more trips out to Washington, D.C. to try and lobby for Alberta's financial future, at least, as well as to push for Canada's financial future under a new government. Let me know your thoughts down below. If it's your first time here, I hope this video has earned your subscription. Make sure you hit that button, join our large Fringe majority here on the channel. Hit your bell for notifications. Join me live here on the channel each and every Friday night for Friday Night Fringe, our live streaming show, where we go over everything that happened this week in politics, everything coming up in the week ahead, as well as some back and forth within the greatest YouTube community on the platform, joined by my beautiful wife, Mrs. Fringe. It all goes down this Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central here on the channel. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video and have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one.